You can reposition.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2023 Winter GRADTalks in person. Great to see you all here. My name is Nancy Walton. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Affairs in the Yates School of Graduate Studies. Before we get started on all the official part of the night, I want to do the land acknowledgement and some reflections, please. I'll be using the Yates School of Graduate Studies land acknowledgement. We're in Toronto, meaning where there are trees standing in the water, and we occupy a place that has been home to Indigenous peoples for over 15,000 years. The Huron-Wendat, the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Yukon. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples and settlers from all over the globe have been welcomed into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Toronto is now home for many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Recognizing where we stand is not to historicize the experiences of Indigenous people or to offer platitudes, but rather it's one of many intentional acts to acknowledge injustice and to commit ourselves individually and collectively as a university community to the path of truth and reconciliation. It's also a reminder that we're all accountable for these relationships. And in terms of intention and accountability and meaningful action, the first step is active reflection on where we are and our privilege and position. Our privilege requires us in turn to engage in education and learning as a next step. I would direct you to the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada report and the Yellowhead Institute's Accountability Report, published each year and most recently in December 2021, outlining how we are doing as a country to address the 94 calls to action that are included in the Truth and Reconciliation Report to reconcile the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. In 2021, after the first discovery of children's graves outside residential schools, 3 calls to action were completed. A language commissioner was appointed, a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was announced, and revisions were made to the Canadian Citizenship Oath. 2 additional calls to action were completed in 2022. But today, 34 calls to action and 81 remain incomplete after 7 years. Many First Nations communities in the country do not have access to clean drinking water. In 2021, it was noted that 2 First Nations communities in Ontario have lived with water advisories for more than 20 years. Another 13 First Nations across the country have been without clean water for more than a decade. To date, more than 2,400 confirmed or suspected unmarked graves have been identified, with searches continuing across the country. Here at TMU, the 2018 Community Consultation Summary Report presents 6 themes as directions for the university and reconciliation. And the Standing Strong Task Force has provided an update on progress made in each of these 6 areas. But as part of the university community, each one of us should consider how we can contribute to and take action on the 6 directions. Develop and implement a strategic vision to indigenize TMU, to improve and expand support for Indigenous learners, to indigenize teaching and learning practices, to increase Indigenous faculty and staff, and to recognize other ways of knowing, to deepen engagement and establish partnerships with local community, Indigenous communities, and other post-secondary institutions, and to increase Indigenous visibility at TMU, and honor the Indigenous histories and cultures. It's part of both our individual and collective responsibility for each of us and all of us to educate ourselves, to reflect on our position and responsibility, to go beyond the land acknowledgement, and to talk to others in our community about how we can work together to take meaningful action. Thank you very much. Now to start, before we get started with this great panel who have assembled here, I want to welcome the Vice Provost and Dean, Dr. Corey Searcy, to give a few words of welcome.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, Nancy, and hi, everyone, and welcome, and thanks so much for being here. I'm very happy to be here with you all tonight for our second Grad Talks of the academic year, which of course is focused on the academic search, and it will include some reflections and advice from our 3 great panelists. In general, Grad Talk series is designed to provide relevant information and professional development resources to help enhance your experience here at TMU. Tonight's topic is something that is no doubt top of mind for many graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, particularly in today's rapidly changing academic employment environment. I think hearing from faculty who've recently gone through the academic hiring process is an important way for all of you to get a sense of the process and also to begin to develop your own strategies and approaches in your own search for a position. Tonight, of course, we're very excited to welcome this panel of recently hired faculty members at TMU. They represent 3 different faculties, so I think they'll be able to give you a range of perspectives on the academic job search. They're all going to share their unique journeys to their academic positions, offer some reflections on their experiences, and provide advice and suggestions to consider for grad students and postdocs in any stage of their career development. After tonight's discussion, please feel free to stick around for continued networking, to get to know your fellow colleagues, and to chat a little bit over refreshments. Of course, we don't want to leave anything on the table, so don't be shy. Go back for seconds, thirds, fourths, whatever it takes, right, to clear the table and to empty the wine bar. Please note that this event is eligible for a credit towards your Future Smart Passport. If you'd like more information on the YSGS Future Smart program, please feel free to get in touch with our graduate student engagement officer, Leslie Utic, who's at the back there. She's the person waving. Yes, so that's Leslie, and she'd be very happy to provide more details. Before I go, I do want to give a very big thank you to Leslie and our other YSGS colleagues for all the work that they've done in helping organize this event. I particularly want to thank Nancy Walton for all the time and effort she puts into all these student events. Seth Dworkin for all the time and effort that he's putting into engaging our postdocs. Of course, all our other YSGS colleagues for all the great work that they do here. Thanks so much to you all for the work that you do here. And again, thanks very much to you all for coming, and enjoy the evening. And if you do search for an academic job, I wish you all the best. And it's a wonderful career, and this is a great way to get started. So enjoy the night.
Thanks, Corey, and I will just echo the thanks to all the people that Corey mentioned, to Leslie Utic and Simone Cote, who's running our live stream and does all our social media, to Andy Lee, Shirley Lee, to Ina, Errol and Sarah Edmonds at the back, to Raquel Thompson, to Andy Lee. I think I haven't missed anyone, to Gina Guercio. All these people were here setting these things up earlier today. And making sure that everything runs smoothly. So without people like all these people who are sitting here helping, these things wouldn't be possible. So tonight, again, as Corey said, we're focusing on the academic job search. GRADTalks is always about career readiness and career planning for graduate students and postdoc fellows across all stages of their academic and graduate studies in their career. We even see a very young person back here in a carriage at the back who might be thinking about an academic career, but that's a bit early, but you can never start planning too early. But it is front of mind, we realize that. And so this event tonight is again focused on career readiness and career planning, but with the perspectives of people who've just gone through it. Rather than us telling you something that you already know, hearing the narratives and the experiences of people who've just gone through it, their reflection and advice, we feel is most helpful. And to that end, we also are planning 3 more events this semester, specifically focused on some very tangible aspects of job searching and career planning. And I'll invite Seth Dworkin, who's our academic lead for postdoctoral fellows, to speak really briefly about these 3 events that are upcoming, and you can get more information at the back of them.
Thank you, Nancy. So as Nancy said, I'm Seth Dworkin. I'm the academic lead for postdoctoral fellows in the graduate school at YSGS. So today we've got this wonderful GRADTalks, which is going to be a launching point. I'm hoping I can recruit as many of you as possible to come to this 3-part workshop series. So part 1 will be on March 22nd, and you'll all receive email information about this. Part 1 will be March 22nd. It will be about, and will be online, it'll be virtual, done via Zoom. And it will be about learning about equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in the university environment, and what one is expected to know as they become a professor. Part 2 will be on developing your application package for tenure stream positions. That will be an in-person and interactive workshop. And part 3 will be on interviewing. That will likely be in person, although that's to be determined. That will also be interactive with some practice interviews and those types of interview questions. So there's some flyers on a couple of the tables and one at the sign-in table with the QR code. You can take a picture of that and sign up this evening for the workshops, or watch grad news and postdoc news and your emails for information on it in the coming week or two. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Seth. Great, thank you, Seth. I think we'll get started. Really quickly introduce our three panelists, and then in the first question we have for them, they're going to really introduce themselves a little more and talk about their own experience. So we have three great panelists from TMU. First, Sarah Dermody. Sarah is a professor in the psychology department in the Faculty of Arts. Chun Lee, who is a professor in chemical engineering in the Faculty of Engineering and Architectural Science, and Michael Baumtrog, who's in the Law and Business program as part of the School of Business Administration in the Ted Rogers School of Management. Welcome to all three of you, and thank you for doing this. We're going to have about an hour panel, just so you all know, and then we will have time for Q&A. So if you have a burning question, keep it, and we will try to address all your questions at the end. Thanks for being here. Okay, we're going to start with Sarah. And I'd like each of you to answer this question, but let's start with Sarah. You've all had different journeys to get to where you are today. Can you take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself again, talk about your unique journey through the academic job search process, and share a few preliminary observations and reflections?
Sure, thanks for inviting me. So I've been at TMU for almost 3 years now, but this was not my first tenure track position. This is my second one, so I can speak from a few perspectives. So I did basically all my academic training in the United States at the University of Pittsburgh. I got my PhD in clinical psychology, and I applied for tenure track jobs in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, and then I got the job. So mine is a story of learning on the go and perseverance, I suppose. And at the time, when I had applied in 2016, I had made the decision, if it wasn't going to work out this time, that I was going to look at other options, which I had some in mind, but having an academic tenure track job was my dream, primarily because I do enjoy teaching. I enjoy the academic freedom that comes with being on the tenure track, and mentorship, being able to work with graduate students, undergraduate students. I'm currently mentoring 2 graduates, well, almost 3 graduate students, and several undergrads, undergrads, RAs, and so on. So I really enjoy my job. And then I guess the other part of my journey is that of my family, which was not something I could hide when I was on the job market. 3 out of the 4 times I was on the job market, I was on the job market of the 4th time when I got the job here. I was either pregnant, very visibly pregnant, 37 weeks pregnant, or nursing. So there was no, I know that's something that can be a concern for people when they're on the job market is, you know, what do I tell? What do I say about my family and like my potential desire for having a family on the tenure track, or having a family that's relocating with me? I mean, it's a really big issue that I'm happy to speak about as well.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And we're happy to hear more about that perseverance, I think, as the evening goes on. Chung, please.
Yeah, hello, my name is Chung. I am from the Department of Chemical Engineering. I started a tenure track position last year in July, so very new. I did my undergrad at McGill University in chemical engineering, and then right after that I did my PhD in mechanical engineering at the University of Toronto. After that I did a postdoc position in New Mexico, Los Alamos National Lab. Those of you who have never heard of that place, Christopher Nolan filmed the movie there when I was there. I think it's being released this year, called The Oppenheimer. So Robert Oppenheimer was the founder of the lab. So yeah, go watch the movie. And yeah, so I was there for 2 years, and then I started applying. Oh, sorry, let me finish. So after that, I got a job at the National Research Council of Canada. there's a new one in Mississauga called the Advanced Material Research Facility. So I was there for 2 months, a month and a half. And then after the training finished, I left, I said bye, and then I joined here. So I started applying for faculty positions in my final year of PhD. And then I think I applied over the course of 3 years, maybe 18 positions. They were mostly in Canada. I applied to one in Germany or two, and in the US as well, but mostly Canada. And I heard back from 4 of them, so I had either pre-screening interviews or direct interviews. And then after that, I had one offer, so that was this one. But interestingly, I interviewed twice for this position. So after I didn't get this position, the year after, the posting came up again. So I applied again, and I went through the process again, and then I got it. So yeah, so that's something unique, I guess. And yeah, I was lucky because when I started my search, I think, well, I shouldn't say lucky because COVID happened. So I as soon as my postdoc started, I stayed home. I was locked out of my lab. So I couldn't do any research, but it gave me some time to focus on my application package. And that time really helped me because that application package, once it was polished, it was ready to go out for, by tailoring it for different positions and stuff. So hope I can talk a little bit about that today as well. So, thank you.
Great, thanks, Chung. And yeah, I think we'd also like to hear a little bit about your perceptions on the difference between the first application process and the second one here at TMU. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Michael, please.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, Michael Baumtrog. I am a philosopher that works in the business school. So I didn't expect that, to put it lightly, which is something we can talk about again, doing things that you might not think are options. We can talk about a little bit later, but going back a little bit, I did my undergraduate and my master's work at the University of Windsor. I applied for 3 PhD programs in Canada and was rejected to all of them. And then a spot opened up in Lisbon, Portugal. So with 2 months notice, I sold everything and moved to Europe to pursue my PhD there. Became very fortunate. I was cross-appointed with a university in Lugano and another one in Amsterdam. So I became a European for a very nice 6 years. I did 4 years, took me 4 years and 2 weeks to the day to do my PhD, and then I did a year postdoc still in Lisbon. Then I did a visiting research position at the University of Leeds before I came back to Canada, where I did a visiting position at the University of Waterloo. And then again, to perhaps inappropriately use the word luck, a professor at the University of Windsor, who was a former instructor of my own, in the first week of class, slipped and hit her head and couldn't teach anymore. But that also meant that the university administration didn't have the time to do the normal hiring and vetting process. It was now a matter of, can you teach tomorrow? And when you know it, I was prepared and ready to go. So before that, I had applied to all kinds of positions with no success, no luck, no interviews, nothing along those lines. But then I was able to just start teaching for the term there. And then that gave me the teaching reviews and things I needed to kind of round out the teaching component of my portfolio to provide some of those quantitative survey results that at the time were more pressing, I think, than they are now in the application process. But it allowed me to round out some of those things and seek real advice and guidance in teaching, which I think was at that point my most obvious weak spot. So that's kind of the road. And then through that, I applied here for the next term for a limited term position, which was in 2017. And I started teaching at TRSM in 2017. I did that limited term for 3 years. And then I switched into the tenure track. So I'm currently in my 6th year of probation, I guess you could say, and I have 3 more to go. And then I can start associating with professors instead of assisting them, which would be good. So that's kind of the path that I got here. Some of my observations and reflections. I think the main thing about the road here is I excluded the places I didn't want to be and then started looking everywhere else. So as a starting point, I think it's really good to remember that your job is important, but you also have to live somewhere. And really in the academic world, it's a global market, right? And starting to think about where it is you actually want to live, I think is a good way to start thinking about oddly where you want to work. So
That's my kind of main reflection on that front, if you are especially internationally inclined.
Thanks, Michael. And just for some people might not know, can you just briefly talk about what a limited term faculty position is?
Sure. So a limited term faculty position, the way that it's articulated usually is that it's considered the same level as an assistant professorship, but it's meant to say replace somebody who's on a sabbatical or something along those lines. I don't know if it's the same across all of TMU, but at TRSM it's limited to a maximum of 4 years. So you can only be on a limited term contract for up to 4 years. I had a 2-year contract to start, and then I applied and got another 1-year contract on that after that, and then they opened up a tenure track position in my area, and I was able to flip over. So what it means is that you teach 3 courses, at least at TRSM, instead of 2, but you technically don't have any research obligations. That's just wrong, because if you want to get on the tenure track, you have to be doing research, right? So it's not listed in your contract, but if you're not doing research as a limited term professor, you're not going to keep your portfolio up to date. So you teach more classes, you still have to do your service, and you still have to do the research in order to then get on the tenure track where you get paid more and you teach less. That's how that works.
Thanks, Michael. That's helpful. We're gonna switch up a bit and kind of follow, again, we're gonna start with Michael on, you talked a little bit about, somebody mentioned sort of thinking about how you're approaching this. Who did you go to for advice? So can you talk, each of you, a little bit about how you sought advice or guidance during the process, in whatever part of the process, whether it's pulling stuff together, preparing for an interview, just thinking about where and how to apply. Who did you reach out to? What kind of guidance did you get or find most useful? So let's start with you, Michael, and then we'll go to Sarah and Chuck.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I think honestly, the most help that I got was from my peers, which might sound a little bit strange, because you would think people who've been in the profession for a long time know these things. But here's my honest view, and I'm speaking almost even first person now from being almost 6 years out. People lose track of the current state of the job market very quickly when they're stable and in a position. I was already nervous coming here, so I'm like, it's been 6 years, do I know? Like, is anything I'm gonna say apply to what these people are doing? But this, I think, will. So work with your peers who are also doing the job search, pool those resources. I think that was very helpful. There was definitely room for advice for people, especially those who hire. Right? When they're reading multiple packages that are coming in, that's very, very helpful. Strategizing where to go, what the newest kind of norms and phrasings are and things like that, what some of the key buzzwords are and strategies are, is very helpful. So I sought my peers out, of course, but also those who evaluate these things. And I'm not getting any commission for this, but I benefited greatly from a book called The Professor Is In, which some of you may have heard about already. If you haven't, it's written by Karen Kelsky, and it's framed in a US perspective, but I think it's framed in a US perspective, but it's very applicable to Canadian and international applications as well. So those are the main things that I did, was peers, people who would evaluate them, and then one book, because you can get lost in internet advice about what to do. And I thought this one book was a nice way to kind of summarize that. In terms of the advice that I received and what was helpful, I only applied to jobs that I would actually take. And I think that sounds kind of funny, but when you start applying often and you face so many rejections and things, you just start kind of applying to everything. But to keep my sanity, I really thought, like, if I were to get this job, would I take it? And that's what I narrowed it down to. And I tried to go for quality over quantity. It doesn't work for everybody, but that's how I kept my sanity. And I felt that helped my applications be stronger individually. And then the advice that I got from senior people, that, a lot of my shift through the job search and the advice I had was really more emotional. Imposter syndrome is real, right? It's a very real thing. I didn't think I was qualified. I didn't think about jobs like working at a business school, and I needed some people in some senior positions to say, what are they gonna say? No, go, right? You get no from everywhere else, try, right? Would you work in Toronto? Yeah, then apply to the business school and see what happens, right? And here we are. So gaining some of that confidence, I think, was really good advice that I got. And your peers can be more and less helpful in that regard. They can be emotionally variable, just like you. So sometimes some steady leadership and some confidence boosting was, I think, as helpful as any of the technical advice I received.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Sarah, do you want to comment a bit on that, please?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Michael has said, that I probably got the most valuable advice from people who had recently gone through the job search process. They shared their materials with me, like their research statements, their CVs and things like that, so I could get a sense of, what a successful package looked like. I think I would have liked to have gotten more advice from more senior individuals who have been on hiring committees, but I didn't really have those connections. Like, yeah, my thesis and my postdoctoral mentors were not in those roles in recent times. So I agree that they lose touch. Just like even applying to graduate school and getting into graduate school, the bar has shifted over the years in terms of competitiveness. One thing that stood out to me that Michael said as well is the issues of imposter syndrome and confidence. I had a bit of a light bulb moment when I attended a workshop that was completely relevant to applying for jobs. It was about women in science, and in particular how we tend to not be very confident. Even I said that in a not very confident way, and that too. So like my first two application cycles, I did apply to a fairly high number of positions and got some interviews, but not as many as I would have expected given my CV. So between my second and my third application cycle, I did a very serious revision of my materials with that in mind. Like, am I bragging about myself in my application? And in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable. That was my personal bar. Maybe not everybody should do that, but I knew as somebody that wasn't particularly confident that I needed to write my materials in a way that made me uncomfortable, that I read it and I was like, oh my God, I'm boasting. And that seemed to do the trick. Between my credentials didn't change from my second to third cycle. I was on mat leave for 6 of those months, so I definitely didn't build up my CV at all. But just the number of interviews that I received had increased substantially. And so I think getting input from others is helpful in terms of your materials and having them proofread, but I think really like sitting down and reflecting on what might be the things that are holding you back when you write your research statement is also important.
Thanks, Sarah. So Michael talked about the book the professor is in. You had that epiphanic moment between the second and third search. How did you get there? Like, what made you sort of reflect that this is what I need to do?
Yeah, it was really like I was just attending this kind of 2-day seminar like on women in science, and there was, I think it was like a panel something like this where women scientists were talking about some of the challenges in an informal way, and people were talking about imposter syndrome and talking about things that held them back, and just I had that reflection that was I sabotaging myself in my applications, because I can't remember the exact number, but I had 17 or 20 publications. Many were first author. I had a pre-doctoral fellowship. I had a CIHR postdoctoral fellowship. On paper, I had everything. So I knew there was something that I wasn't doing right. And the people who proofread my materials didn't point this out. I had to figure it out myself.
Thanks. That's a good observation for us all to kind of learn from. So, Chung, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah. So my main 4 resources were first was Google Jobs. Google Jobs is amazing. So like Michael said, if there's some areas of interest that you're pinned on, like those are good ways to filter them, and you get newsletter or emails like every week, every day sometimes. So it's a good way for you to, kind of know where the jobs are and stuff. My second was my advisor, my PhD advisor. She was very, very supportive. She really wanted me to get a faculty position. So she really went, far and beyond to really help me. So, she really helped me revise my, application package, and kind of even go out and ask the hiring committee of the department, like, whether like something like this should be there, or is that kind of not appropriate, or yeah, so she really went beyond, so I'm very grateful to her. And also my peers, so peers especially who recently become faculty members, sharing their application package to me, I think was really, really crucial for me, because those are the things that people look for in, like in recent times, right? So it's helpful for you to kind of understand what they're looking for and, and apply them. And fourth are like workshops and conferences. So one of the workshops that I attended regularly online was a professor named Dermody. He's a professor in UCSD, materials engineering, UC San Diego, sorry. And he had a lot of great resource on what it means to go through an academic job search, like from begin, like starting your first package and applying for your first job all the way to the interview, and even like how to respond after the interview, like after the interview. These things are challenging, and I think it's really helpful if you meet the people that are in the same path as you through these workshops, because sometimes you just, like, for example, I'm not gonna say where, but like I interviewed a place like 2 years ago and I still haven't heard back from them. It was like a final round interview, right? Like so they haven't still told me if I didn't get the job or I got the job. So and this is typical. I think a lot of people, like, before I would be like, oh, I mean, that sucks. Like, they just don't care about me. I spent so much time preparing for this, but I think a lot of people would agree with you that, like, that are in the same path, like they'll be like, yeah, I mean, I've been there too. So that really helps you mentally. But also in conferences, like even if it's not conferences related to the job search, like just in your own field, like talking to professors, new professors, older professors, who've been through the process. Sometimes even conferences have time where young professors come and give their perspective, kind of like this on the job search. So that really helped me really just to kind of set myself unique from others, and how to strategize my applications and stuff. So those are all the things that are really helpful to me. Yeah.
Thanks, Chung. Can you talk a little bit about, you said the first thing you said was Google Jobs. It was amazing. It really helped me. I'm contrasting that with Michael sort of saying I was kind of careful to curate down to jobs I only knew I would take, and I know you didn't apply for every job that came to a Google Jobs, but can you talk a little bit about why you found that so helpful? Was it just exposing yourself to that much information?
I mean, because I think the alternative, which is definitely what a lot of people do, is to go to individual universities and check their job postings. It's just like time consuming, and for me, I think I had a slightly different approach from Michael, because I really, really wanted to become a faculty member. So I applied everywhere in Canada, for example, and sometimes you get asked questions too. Like I've heard from workshops where people interviewing for example, University of Regina, they would ask you, like, are you ready to live here, kind of thing. And I'm sorry if I offended Regina, but like, I mean, but it's not Toronto's not for everyone, right? It's not for everyone. So it's definitely important to consider that. But for me, I grew up as a child of a professor, and I really admired being like his lifestyle and his relationship with the students, and was one of my main goals in my life. So I really applied everywhere. So in terms of that, but then Google Jobs can also allow you to filter like locations. So you can definitely take Michael's approach in Google Jobs as well. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Chen. So continuing on this sort of idea of guidance or advice, there's graduate students and postdocs at all different stages here tonight. Can you think back maybe to early on in your grad studies, maybe in your beginning of your master's? Was there some experiences you sought out or things you did to kind of lay groundwork then for your eventual, you might, without knowing what it might look like, the eventual job search? So when you're reflecting back now, is there anything from your early graduate studies that you did that either prepared you well for the academic job search that you would say to others, make sure you do this, or that you wished you'd done more to help prepare you? And Chung, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think one of the things that helped me was to have multiple consultations with my advisor. She was very supportive for me in terms of like what kind of job direction I would like to take, and academia was definitely one of them. And then that really helped me because she then started involving me more in the type of work in the lab that would be beneficial for my career as an academic. So for example, grant writing, or even mentoring students together with my supervisors. So if I'm a PhD student, mentoring master's student, or even start interviewing students when they first apply for the graduate studies. So I think that process really helped me because that kind of it's like a sneak peek of what it means to be an academic. So I think that I'm really glad that I brought that up to her and I got to experience all that, because all of that actually even helped me quite literally just down the road when I apply for jobs, because it opened up more doors and I built more skill sets that are relevant. So yeah.
Is there anything in retrospect that you wish you'd done more, that you eventually were like, I wish I'd gone to those things more, or done that? Is there anything?
Yeah, definitely networking. I was pretty, and I am still very introverted, so it's hard to, I'm a type of guy, if I go to the conference, I would just, after my talk and after the session's finished, I just go back to the hotel room, lock myself, and I don't know, watch Netflix or order pizza. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing I definitely would have liked to do more. I would have liked to be connected with all these amazing graduate students that I studied together with, not just in my lab, but in other labs. I think whenever there were opportunities I should have gone, I think that would have really helped, because all of them are very successful. They're professors, they're industry leaders, or they're national lab facilities. So, having that connection would have really helped me now as well. But I think, yeah, overall, just, getting to network and knowing a lot of people that are sharing the same journey with you, I think is really important. So,
Any tips on networking? Because probably there's a lot of people who, after their talk is at the conference, or they've attended someone else's talk, they go back to their hotel room or go for a walk by themselves. Any tips on how you went from that to being someone who was able to do networking?
Yeah, I mean, so you have to start somewhere. You have to force yourself. You gotta find that room in the circle, like just awkwardly be the outlier in the circle. Just start kind of creeping in there, and you have to start somewhere. And oftentimes you also get rejected. And there's a lot of not everyone's not for you, right? And you're not for everyone too, right? So I've heard stories where actually it came from an advisor. She approached someone that she's like, oh, I want to learn more about what you do. Like, what do you do for your research? And it was an older professor. And the older professor was like, oh, you wouldn't understand. It's really too complicated. And they just walked away, right? That's horrible. Like, that's horrifying, right? Like you just really step out of your comfort zone to try to network, and then you just get rejected in the face. But I mean, that's just reality, right? And once you just keep trying and keep pushing yourself, then I think eventually you'll get to meet the people that you wanted to, and I think it'll eventually happen. But it definitely takes some time. I mean, you gotta be determined, and you gotta kind of force yourself. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that tip. And Sarah, same question, back to the original question.
Yeah, I would say I was really green when I went to grad school. I went straight from undergrad. And while I had in my mind the goal of being academic, I didn't actually understand. I was pretty naive in thinking I just need my PhD and I'll apply for jobs and I'll get on the tenure track. So I don't think it really sank in for me until I was a little bit further along in my degree that I need to publish, I need to get grants, I need to build these connections through networking. So all that to say, it's not too late. If you don't figure it out until maybe your midpoint or towards the end of your doctoral work that you want to go this route, that you can be pretty productive in those final years and then do a postdoc, and that productivity could really boost your competitiveness for programs. So I can give advice based on what I do with my graduate students now. I mean, at the outset, when they start out, I do ask them what their goals are, and some of them have been, more academically oriented. Some have been interested in more hybrid careers because it's a clinical psychology program, so you can be a practitioner and a researcher or both. And I have them do a 5-year plan, even though the PhD usually does take 6 years. Just to try to break down, like, what would it take year by year to get to that point? So first you put your milestones, because those are the most important. You have to do your thesis, you have to do your exams. Like, yeah, publishing is great, but you have to do those things. And then, everything else, we kind of sprinkle that in. And I think the benefit of that is just, again, to kind of keep in mind that there are many years to kind of build those credentials to go into an academic career. You don't have to do it all at once. Like, I've had people I've worked with that they're starting out their first year of graduate school much more informed than I was as a graduate student. They're like, I need to publish, I need to publish, I need to publish. I'm like, relax, you just got here. It's okay, let's make a plan, let's space it out. You don't have to do it all at once, because you don't want to burn out, right? You can't let yourself burn out. So that would be my main take on that.
Thank you. And so you're giving the advice based on what you do for your grad students now. You said you were really green when you entered grad school. Can you talk a little bit about your advisor, your supervisor, how they kind of helped? Did they get you to do a 5-year plan? Were you kind of on your own? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my first advisor didn't get tenure and had to leave the institution pretty suddenly. So we had a great relationship, but I didn't really publish with her. So I can't put it all on me. I guess that I wasn't productive in my first years. It was partly, I think, related to the mentorship. So then I got a new advisor for my dissertation for the PhD part. And I would say I didn't get great mentorship from him. I think the one conversation we had about jobs, so for context, I study addiction, like tobacco and alcohol use disorder. And suddenly in one meeting, he just looked at me and he was like, Sarah, are you going to take a job with the tobacco industry? Which is seen as the evil side of where I could go. It would be so disappointing to him if I went that career. And I don't know where that question came from, but those jobs paid really well. Maybe if I didn't get a tenure track job, no, I wouldn't have done that. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have great mentorship. So I think these panels are great. So if your mentor isn't really talking to you about those things, that hopefully you're making other connections and learning from other people.
And it sounds like you're an excellent mentor for grad students now. So, Michael, same question for you.
Thanks. Yeah. So, when I think back to my master's was my favorite time in my education, to be honest. I really enjoyed it. Undergrad was chaos and difficult. Master's was a little more focused, but not as much pressure as the PhD. So really for me, it was a sweet spot. I liked it a lot. I didn't have at that point a whole lot of career advice for this stage, right? It was still a little bit further away, but I did have experiences that were crucial in the application process. Number one, improving my writing. I don't know how else to say it. When you send an application package, it's not on the phone, right? The first thing they do is open it up and read the words. That's the first impression, and that's your voice, and that's what they're gonna remember, the beginning and the end, right? And so learning to do that writing, I think, was really crucial. And one particular experience, I've always been a shameless idealist. I continue to be one. I've always wanted to change the world. So fresh out of undergrad, I applied to the United Nations, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I got rejected immediately on the first try. And then during my second year of my master's, I had a lovely partner who was in the English literature department, and she said, let's look at your application. And that's when I realized that for those important things, you go sentence by sentence, line by line. It's painful, it's slow. I cried at least twice, right? And she was like, why are you crying? I'm like, this is hard, right? And I'm a philosopher. I deal a lot with words and language, and still this was very, very difficult. But for each line, I asked myself questions like, what's the point of this sentence? Is this the clearest possible way I could make this point? Have I already said something like this? And if so, is the repetition necessary, right? How is this connecting to or leading to other parts, right? And just to do that, to really take the time to improve your writing is crucial, right? Another thing that we had to do, an exercise that I remember was to take Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, which if you haven't read it, I'm so jealous. Don't read it, but it's really, really hard. And we would have to take 20 pages of text and summarize it into 2 pages without sacrificing content. And this is how we were graded. What a painstaking task, but hugely, hugely valuable when it came to actually producing and writing job applications, right? To be able to put everything you want to say about you into a 1 to 2 page cover letter, including your research, teaching, and don't forget, you have to have a personality because they're also looking for that, right? So it's a skill. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot harder than you think. You never stop developing it. We were chatting before we sat down. I still continue to work on my writing to this day. But I think that was, for me, the most crucial thing that prepared me in the master's, even though it wasn't framed as, do this, it'll help you get a job. But it was that way. In terms of what I wish would have happened, again, I don't want to be the super emotional guy on the stage, but what I needed was people to dismantle standard notions of success and failure. You have to throw them out, right? I noted you had said earlier, you applied to maybe 18 places, right? And we kind of gloss over that. But that first rejection, oh, it stings, right? Oh boy, it stings, right? But you have to start to change your way you're thinking about what is success and what is failure. You only actually ever succeed once. Everything else is kind of a failure. So that's the standard, that's the norm, which in a way makes it not even a failure. It's just, there is normal and then you can succeed sometimes, right? It's a lot easier to say that than it is to feel it. But dismantling that and recognizing that it's not a reflection of you or your worth every time somebody doesn't choose you is crucial. One of my mottos is that success is only preparation followed by luck, right? You have to have those necessary conditions and that preparedness, and then it's luck, right? If you get rejected, it could be for any reason. And I've seen a lot of different cases where it's not even a reasonable reason. And I can say that because my expertise is in reasoning. So trust me, it's not even a reasonable reason, right? But it has nothing to do with you. Nothing, right? But that's so hard to feel when you first are facing those things and nobody has told you before, look, you are worth a whole lot no matter how many places don't accept you, right? And not being accepted is also not the same as an act of rejection, right? And these things are hard to parse, and if you don't start thinking about them and preparing them, you can give up quickly. Right, in the academic job market, it can be challenging. It can be brutal to kind of go through that many applications and feel like you're not succeeding. I think every time you get a rejection and you make a change to your application and you improve it, you've learned something, you succeeded a little bit, and you should keep going.
Thanks, Michael. Can you just sort of said what I was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you to say a little more about getting a rejection or a failure to accept you. You said the first thing you should do, or you didn't say that, you said one thing you can do is change to your application. What else can you do when you're faced with that, when you've worked really hard, you've applied to 18 places, you've boosted your CV, so you're bragging about yourself, you think you're in great shape, and then you get maybe you go through an interview process, maybe you don't, but you get a rejection. What are some of the things that you can talk about that are tangible that you can do to after that?
Ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream.
Ice cream is a big help, I find. That got me through a lot of things, right?
Any particular flavor?
I'm not a Neapolitan guy. I'm a chocolate or strawberry, never together. We don't have to go down this road. But that's one thing, but honestly, and I said it earlier, this is where peers are also very, very helpful, right? And, speaking with them, going through the ups and the downs with them. I'll be honest with you too, sometimes what it felt to me like the biggest failure was when my peers were succeeding. And I'm like, oh, that stings even more. I want to be happy for you, but oh, that stings, right? But, networking with your peers and with your friends and leaning on them for support. My sister was huge, right? And so I had basically 2 streams of support when I needed it most. One from a senior academic who was like, no, you're smart. And then my family who, they don't think I'm as smart as my professors do, but they love me anyway. So, you need both of those things, right? You need the personal connections and you need some of the professional support if you can find it. And I really liked what I heard earlier about, your mentors. And if you can recognize that maybe you need help from a different kind of a mentor, that's really, really good advice, right? To pay attention and to see what's the quality of the mentorship that you're getting. And then if you can actively seek out better mentorship, it's a really wise thing to think about.
Great, thanks, Michael. So let's go now to sort of the process of the application, the interviews, the whole academics job search process. Each of you, we can see your strengths and you've talked a little bit about them, which we appreciate. But what are some of the strategies you used? And Sarah, you really talked about this, but we want to hear more. What strategies did you use to highlight your strengths? Your professional, your personal strengths in preparing your application package and in interviews? What are some ways you purposefully highlighted those strengths? And how do you think you made your application stand out? Let's start with Chung and then Sarah and Mike.
Yeah, so one of the things that for the application, you have to remember that the committees go through a lot. They're not gonna have time to read everything. In fact, they're not, even if they do have time, they're not gonna go through everything, every single word you wrote. So I really took advantage of the cover letter section. So when you submit a application package, I used to just submit a single PDF with like a title page and then like an outline, like which page is what kind of thing. And then the first content of that application package is the cover letter. And sometimes a lot of people start by saying, you know, I'm very pleased to apply to this position. I'm a very enthusiastic, passionate guy. I think I fit really well. Then rather than doing that, I thought, and I think this really helped me, is to like start with bullet points. And I started these bullet points by saying highlights at a glance. So I'm basically, and this is a really good way to kind of show that you've hit all the tick marks that's in the job posting. So for example, if the job posting is looking for a certain topic, looking for a certain type of people that can teach something, I would explicitly put that I have experience in this, and not just qualitatively, like I'm passionate for teaching, so I can do this kind of thing. You should write, like, I've taught this many courses, I got a TA award, I published this many publications, I got this many awards. So for awards, for example, if they're looking for independent researchers that can seek out their own funding and lead their own research program, you know, writing about awards is a really good way to show that. Like I got this much amount of award to fund my own research that I've developed. So these kind of things, I tried to put them in that highlights at a glance section. And then I kind of followed that up with elaborating each point in the cover letter. So rather than having it being like a simple letter where you're just talking about things in paragraphs, I tried to make it sort of more digestible for people that are really busy. So I think that really helped. And I got this idea from my advisor again, because she was in the hiring committee once and everyone was really impressed by it. So that's why she recommended me to do the same. So that's what I did. I think that really helped. And then during the interview, I have a few advice. One thing that really helped me was to get to know the people that you're going to meet in advance. And I know you're going to be busy practicing your teaching demonstration or research presentation, but really spend some time to research, ask them like who the committee members are, and then kind of read some of the recent publications, even like just go through the abstract, don't have to read the entire paper, just to know what their research interests are. And I think this really brings out that you're a collaborative person, you really care. And I often say this, but one of the favorite things scientists hear is when someone knows about your research. Like if you start talking about that person's research, they get really excited. That's a trick. So yeah, definitely do that. And make cheat sheets so that you can read them before entering each room. And another tip is that, for example, I had a 2-day interview once. So that includes lunch, dinner, and then lunch the day after, and meeting professors back to 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 back. So it's really tiring, and a lot of times when professors take you to the next room, they ask you if you want to go to the washroom. And I always tell people to go to the washroom, even if you don't have to, because that really gives you a break. Just go in there and just take a breather, check out your outfit, make sure it looks tidy, make sure, and then if you have a energy bar, eat it, and just kind of take that time, or use that time to take a break and read your cheat sheet or something like that, and then never relax. Like dinners especially, you're usually offered to drink, and you drink usually, so I usually tell people to not drink, even if you like drinking. I don't drink, so it worked out, but sometimes, a lot of mistakes happen during these times is what I hear. So, yeah, and no clumsy food. Like if you're eating tacos and you're spilling shrimp everywhere in your suit and stuff, and you're trying to talk at the same time. Oh yeah, my research is like doesn't look good, right? So like it's not. You can get your nice taco after your interview, right? So don't try to yeah. So just take bite-sized foods and something that'll digest well. And those are my tips.
Thanks, Jen. So far, ice cream after rejection and no tacos during the job search. I know in one of my 2-day interviews many years ago to be a faculty member, in between one of those back-to-back where someone is with you all the time, I didn't take your advice, and they said, well, go and we're gonna get you a sandwich. This was not a formal lunch, we'll get you a sandwich and you can have some time. And I said, okay, great. And I went and they took me to the university cafeteria and I chose an egg sandwich. I know. And then the person said, okay, and sat down with me, but didn't take a sandwich, it just watched me eat. And it was, I thought, I had a break. So I think being prepared for anything during that back-to-back, but taking a break then would have been great. So thank you for those really helpful nuggets of advice. Sarah, any food-related things to recommend?
I did have an incident, but I don't know if we have time for that. I didn't get that job. It was a job in the US, multiple variables. It was a job in the US. And then I was interviewing, I was a postdoc in Canada. So I was interviewing, and then I was interviewing, we were at dinner and Trump got elected. And they just looked at me, they're like, you don't want to come here. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm getting this job. Yes, I do, I want to be here. I don't care about the president. Other advice, I talked about with the application materials, like making sure to be confident. And I think being like to the point and very clear in your writing is essential too, because absolutely people, they may be reviewing like dozens, if not even maybe you have like 100 or so applications depending on your field and how desirable the position is. In terms of the interview process, I guess the quick tips. I also learned this, I guess the hard way, is that the confidence has to be at the interview too, not just on paper. So I think I might have surprised people with my confident paper, and then I came in person, I was like, hi, I'm Sarah, nice to meet you. So it took me a little while to get the confidence in person and just kind of believe in myself that like they invited me for this interview because I am awesome. That makes me feel comfortable. But I had to pretend, at least while I was there. And then it's hard to get feedback after interviews. It's usually radio silence. You sometimes don't even get a rejection, which baffles me, but it does happen. But in one case, I did find that I made like a close connection with someone on the hiring committee, and I found out I did get the job, and I asked them, I was like, could you tell me what I could have done better? And they said, let's talk on the phone, which that means they're gonna talk straight with you because they're not gonna put it in an email. And they basically told me that like, I didn't stick to the script. So just keep in mind, when you apply and give your materials and there's a job ad, right? They are looking for someone in particular, and they brought you there because of what was in your materials, was like what they believed you'd bring to them. So I went and I didn't stick to the script, meaning like they wanted someone doing a specific type of research. And when I interviewed, I said, oh yeah, I want to do this, but I also want to do all this other stuff. And I think that kind of like detracted from what they were looking for. They wanted someone that did health-related diversity research. And I remember this moment, like at the end of my job talk, that specific person, I think, fed me a question to try to help me, which was very kind of them. And I said, no, I don't think I'd look at that. So that's my other piece of advice. For the most part, say yes to things unless there's something completely unreasonable. So, oh, would you be interested in collaborating? Yes. Would you be interested in teaching that class? Yes. That would be great. I have never taught anything related to that before, but I would really like to teach that class. So say yes, and then later say no. Another piece of advice. And then speaking about breaks, ask for them. it's ridiculous how it's just not accommodating for any human being, like these back-to-back meetings that can span a whole day, like breakfast to late dinner and even go into the next day. I asked for them because, like I mentioned, I was nursing, so I needed to be pumping like regularly. So I said, every 3 hours I need 20 minutes. I should have said more than that because everything runs behind, but 20 minutes in a private room. And I realized in terms of how that was accommodated, I needed to be even more specific about that, like not just a private room, but a room with like a lock. One place put me in the grad lounge, which had no lock, and they said, don't worry, the students don't get out of the class until noon. So I'm like pumping in the grad lounge with my foot against the door, looking at my watch. I'm like, hopefully they don't get up early. It's ridiculous. But that also taught me something about that place. I was like, so that's my final piece of advice. You're interviewing and you want the job so bad, but do you really want that job? Like, these are the people that you could be working with for a very long time. So you want to go in not just like trying to, showcase yourself in the best light possible, but you want to do detective work, like notice like the watermark stains and how well maintained the labs are. Like, does everybody have a lab? Where are the graduate students treated well? Do they have space? All these things that you need to also attend to while you're there. Because if you're offered the job, you'll have a really important decision to make about whether you want to spend, like potentially relocate yourself, your entire family to that place and invest a lot of effort and your intellect into this community. So it is a two-sided street as well.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm just sort of picking up on what you're saying about you're not, there's an expression that you're not just being interviewed for a job, you're interviewing those people. And you're saying something a little different, which is look around, like take note if you're not being given a proper place to pump or to breastfeed, then maybe that's not a priority at this place. Or if they're saying we're not going to give you a break, then maybe that's a cultural thing that you may not feel that is right for you. So I think one of the important things you're saying is pay attention to those things that at the moment feel like, I just got to get through this, but maybe it's telling you something about the culture, about the place.
Yeah, because they're bringing you because they want to recruit you. I mean, it's still an interview, but they've narrowed it down to like 2, maybe 3 people that they're bringing on campus. So they're also trying to recruit you. They're putting their best foot forward. So they're not going to, it'll be very hard, I think, unless you have like an inside knowledge to get like the insider scoop about the downsides and the pitfalls of a specific place. So even if something is expressed in like kind of a mild negative, you kind of like want to like take note of that. Like my first job, I remember when I interviewed, they said, oh, the ethics board can be challenging sometimes. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, the main reason why I left that position was because of the ethics board, not just being challenging sometimes, but being incredibly difficult to work with. So sometimes you don't know till you get there and you can get out, right? Once you're in a job, I think it is easier to get a second job. Yeah, you need to scope the place out for yourself.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And Michael.
Thanks, yeah, I'm not gonna take too long. I think my answer is, picks up on parts of what I've heard already, except for pumping. I haven't had to do that. But the application process and the interview process for me were entirely different. In the application process on paper, I wanted to stand out. And as we heard already, and I totally agree with, in the interview process, I focused on fitting in. And so you're almost speaking 2 different languages when you're doing these things. In one, you're in a pile of, at most, I think the average philosophy job attracts about 200 applicants. And so, there are going to be some broad cuts, but even if you get down to the final 20, you need to stand out. And so, what I really focused on there was, and I hadn't used the expression before, but like sticking to the script. And one of the things that I did was I found all kinds of ways to call my area of specialization different things. Right? So if you ask me what I specialize in now, I'm 100% sure, right? Like, I did a PhD in argumentation, but that's not a department, right? So where do you want it? You're going to bring it to a philosophy. Okay, so I do philosophy of language, right? But if they don't want a philosopher of language, well, then it's, philosophy of language with an epistemological slant, right? Or in this case, I do practical reasoning, which is what I focused on, which is about making decisions, and I focused on ethics in that component. So argumentation theory is now practical reasoning with a focus on ethics, which is really good for a business school, right? So depending on the ways that you decide to call what you do what to fit in can really help you stand out, right? And there are lots of usually ways to describe what it is that you do. And again, this was part of like narrowing and tailoring to each department rather than, I have some friends of mine who have basically a template that they very minorly tweak and kind of send out, but I think that stands out a little bit, especially when you get a lot of applications and you're reading through a lot of them. So, I tried to do it that way. So the way I tried to stand out was in the creativity of my ideas, making sure that I use as many possible keywords from the ad in my cover letter as I possibly could. Because sometimes, to be honest with you, AI is becoming more and more common. Sometimes the first round of cuts is a machine that says, these applicants have the highest percentage of keyword overlap. Let's start there. It could be if they're, resource strapped, the starting point, you're not sure. But these things, they put effort into wording those calls in a certain way for a reason, right? And they want that script, right? That's what they're looking for. So tailoring these things, right? So that was when I think I stood out there. But then absolutely, as soon as I hit the interview, it's not about me. And you know what? What's the best way to avoid having to answer questions than having other people who are interviewing you talk? Oh, it's beautiful. As the time ticks by, you're like, keep going, brother, keep going, right? I love it. And they feel better, right? The book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie says, the sweetest sound to anybody's ears is the sound of their own name, right? So learn their names, have your little cheat sheet. I think it's good. Even if you're just looking over CVs at paper titles, even if you're just getting a grip on that kind of stuff and thinking about how you're going to fit in. Academia, professorships is one of the last old-fashioned careers. You get a job and you stay in it. And honestly, I think about the job as a marriage. Very important. If you don't want to be in an unhappy marriage, right? As we heard about. But I'm going to have to see these colleagues until they're old, till I'm real old and gray, and like, we're going to be stuck together for a long time. I have my family and my work family. Really, like, it feels like it's that much of a commitment in a relationship. So instead of standing out at the interview, I wanted to be the person that they want to see tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. I'm super, super lucky that my biggest defense mechanism is humor. Right? That's a really big advantage. If your defense mechanism isn't humor, get a pun book. It works, right? These things help. It breaks the ice for everybody, right? And so that's really what I focused on. I think for the interviews, it was showing that I'm competent, but also showing that they want me to be around. So I think that really is just a synthesis of what we've heard already. Yeah.
Thanks, I really like that as a synthesis. And I am aware that a lot of people are not comfortable using humor, or sometimes humor can really backfire because it's not the pun that anyone in the room appreciates, or, using humor judiciously and thoughtfully can sometimes be a way. So, yeah, so I'm aware of time, and I know, Sarah, you have about 5 minutes before you have to go, so I'm gonna just change some ordering here to ask you 2 questions at once, so that you can answer them both, because we want to hear, and then I'll switch over to Michael and Chung to allow you to go home to your family. So 2 things. In retrospect, is there anything, and you talked a little bit about this, so maybe there's something different. Is there anything about your application or the process you changed, or anything about the experience you would have done differently? And the second question is, can you give one, you've given many, can you give one more nugget of advice to our students and postdocs here tonight on the search process? You can build on that previous nugget, if that helps.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something new. So one more piece of advice,
And
and
anything you would have done differently.
anything I would have done differently. Well, I guess it would have been nice to have figured out the confidence thing earlier. But I think in the end, and this might be my coping strategy, it's like it happened that way for a reason. Like the job that I ultimately got several years ago, like it wasn't available the other years. And I think it was despite the problems with ethics board, like a good fit for me. I could have still been there, but it was actually some family related things that led me to go on the job market again in 2019, and I got the job here. And going through that process the second time with a job in hand was totally different. Like, I was confident because I had nothing to lose. I had my job, right? And so I felt like I was able to put myself, my foot forward, best foot forward, and be confident and really think about, like, do I want to come here? Unfortunately, like, my department here is awesome. And when I told them I had a baby, they actually asked me to bring the baby with me, and they said that another faculty member would have the baby in the office while I had my interviews, and I could go and nurse the baby. I was like, oh, that's really nice, but you guys are strangers. I'd rather leave my baby at home anyway. But that told me a lot too, because, like, speaking about, like, work family, like, and, like, personal family, like, yeah, I want those boundaries to be respected. So that was important. So I think that second time on the job market really kind of reiterated to me that the confidence is important. So just reflecting on how you can obtain that. I think the psychology of, like, thinking like, this is it, like, if I don't get this, then there's nothing, is gonna backfire. So reflecting on, like, what the other options are, approaching job interviews in a way that is very much like, I wanna see if this is a good fit for me. Is this where I wanna spend many, many, many years or not, can be helpful. Other nuggets, the academic community is small. Like, even internationally, like, I had a job in the US, I had a job now in Canada, but the psychology discipline is small. So try not to burn bridges. People talk to each other like that you wouldn't expect. So that brings up, the importance, the value of networking, but as well as just trying to keep relationships neutral or positive.
I'm going to thank you, Sarah, because I know you've got to go, and really appreciate all that advice. I think the piece with confidence is really sticking with me and probably a lot of you, and thinking about ways that you can, build yourself up, surround yourself with people who can help you build yourself up and build your confidence. So you're doing that kind of all along the way, that it becomes almost second nature. I really want to thank you, Sarah, for joining us tonight. I wish you all good things. We will invite you again to talk about something else, and we are grateful that you were here. We've got a family at home like everyone, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I know I'm not here for the final Q&A, but if anybody has questions for me, like, specifically, you're welcome to email me. I'm very happy to answer questions about this.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So let's go back to the two questions, and I'm going to direct, thanks Sarah, the first one to Chung. Actually, I'm going to direct the first one to Michael. Is there anything about your application, thinking back, that you changed, something you do differently about the experience when you're looking at it from here?
Yeah, the applications themselves, there's not a whole lot, but the number one thing I would have changed is I would have asked more people for help, and I would have asked some people more often, right? I was really afraid to be like, can I have another reference letter? Can I have another reference letter? I know this is application number 24 in March, but can I get another reference letter? Just do it, right? I mean, these people are there to support you, and if you just bring that out right away, be like, I think this might be a bit of a long haul. Let's keep an ongoing list so you don't have to ask every single time, is it okay, right? You can just be like, here's the next one, and they know it's coming, right? So establishing that kind of a standard, I think, is helpful, but I was shy, right? I was shy to ask for some of that support. I was shy to bother, especially people that I thought were more senior, but even my peers who I also knew were busy, right? Again, people may say, sorry, I don't have the time, but ask, right? It's really, I think a really helpful thing to do. And then honestly, at the risk of being kicked off the stage, I would have put a lot more effort into non-academic job searches. The academic job market is a very narrow one. The odds, as we hear, are quite slim. I think it's just prudent to always have your eye on jobs outside of the academy. And that's not just for potential success reasons, but it's a skill to switch an academic CV into a public or a private sector resume. It's a skill to shift an academic cover letter into a public or a private sector cover letter. And if you start to fall behind on that domain and the academic world doesn't work out, it's a lot easier to kind of have kept up as you go along than to have to start over and learn a whole other domain. So those are the two things I would have done. Sorry, I know this is about applying to the job market for the academic world, but let's be real, you also need to eat. And not only that, there are incredibly valuable, fruitful opportunities in the public and private sector. And luckily now I've become more familiar, even though I don't need it. There are lots of people doing workshops on how to do that conversion, right? So I know in Toronto here, there's a specialist named Jennifer Polk who works on this kind of thing, and you can help, you can go through courses like that people like her offer to help do that transition as well. But those are the two things. Reach out, ask more people, don't feel so bad about it, and keep your eye also on non-academic opportunities.
Thanks, Michael. And yeah, we're not going to kick you off the stage. We actually had a panel last year at this time on working in government. So we have explored and tried to help grad students and postdocs explore other opportunities, because I think you're right. It's also a skill that you learn new things and applying for different places that you can bring back that are transferable. So I think that's a really important reality check for everybody to hear. Chung, please.
Yeah, I agree a lot of things like what Bill said. I was in a non-academic job for 2 months, but that was because I told myself that I would not apply for academic jobs anymore after a certain point, because I did like Michael said earlier, a lot of it has to do with luck. So, banking all of your life on something that's dependent so much on luck, it's not healthy. So I always kept most options open. But another tip maybe that I could add that I wish I would have done differently is related to EDI. I'm not sure, maybe I'm the only one, but I didn't really know anything about EDI and whether I needed to care in my undergrad and my graduate school. I was in a diverse group, like the research lab that I was in was very diverse, but I didn't really get myself out and educate myself. And nowadays, a lot of the trend is a lot of universities require an EDI statement. So it's a 2-pager describing, equity, diversity, inclusion differently in different sections. And I didn't know what to write. I was involved in many Indigenous related work in my graduate school. I went to visit Northern Ontario, very remote communities to give workshops for elementary students for about engineering. So that was really fun, and I did that because it was fun. I didn't do that because I wanted to change the world or anything. I wasn't really thinking in terms of the EDI sort of perspective, I guess. I don't know if that's the appropriate way to say it. But yeah, so I didn't know the language, like what kind of how EDI is important in an academic setting and things like that. So I had to spend a lot of time reading, learning about that, and it was very challenging. So I think that's one thing that I really think I would have done differently. I would have maybe involved myself more in workshops, maybe delivered about EDI, that I would maybe learn more and why it's important and things like that. So yeah.
Thanks, Chung, and appreciate that. And that's great for news for Seth and myself leading. Well, Seth's going to lead that session on EDI competencies and capacity and how to talk about them, think about them, and develop some of those skills to explore and learn it. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go to the very last question. And all three of you have given significant advice and really opened yourself up and talked about yourself and your experience really thoughtfully. Is there any other piece of advice, nugget of advice you want to give to the grad students and postdocs here? Let's start with Michael.
You're smart and you're valuable, and you can keep getting better. You can keep changing things. There are roads that you could not even possibly predict right now that will maybe open up for you. When I talk about preparation followed by luck being success, that also means having some courage to take some doors that you might not, right? To move everything in 2 months and go to Europe and try it, see what happens, right? You can do a lot of things if you have a little bit of courage and you're willing to go. You need to do the preparation, but even if you end up getting a job like us, don't forget how lucky you were, right? It's not just because everything was in your control and you're the best candidate and the genius. A lot of things have to align. And similarly, if they don't always align, it's not a reflection on you, right? So that's really my piece of advice, right? Try to keep your head up and don't raise it any higher when you actually land something. Just keep it up. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Chung, you have the last word.
Sure, yeah. So this is a quote from the grade one that my advisor uses a lot. I think it goes something like, you miss 100% of the shot you don't take. So it's basically just, I had to once, so I applied to a lot of postdoctoral fellowship awards, and a lot of them were just insanely long. Like there's one that I applied to called Newton's. It's by the Royal Society of Chemistry, just the Royal Society in the UK. And we needed 5 recommendation letters, of which one of them, my hosting advisor that I don't know, right? I just met online or on a conference, had to find someone to recommend my project within the university, within the country that doesn't know me and doesn't know. But it's just very complex. It's a very awkward thing to ask, right? Sometimes, and whenever you look at these specifications, you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to, yeah. But don't be like that, right? I mean, because a lot of people do think like that, but you can be the one that actually applies, and don't fear rejection. Because if you never apply, you'll never get one, right? And once you start getting these things roll like a snowball, right? So I think that's one thing that I'm really glad I tried, is just to keep trying, right? And even when you're faced with rejections, just keep going, right? So.
Great. Thank you both, and thank you to Sarah. Let's show our appreciation for this great discussion that we've had. Thank you. We do have some time for Q&A. So if you have questions for either Michael or Chung or for both of them, yes. And maybe when you put your hand up a question, just stand up and yell out who you are and what program you're from too.
Hi, thank you for the panel. I'm Melody from Communication and Culture, so Faculty of Arts. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the very intricate process of the dinners. Sometimes you can be in situations where faculty members are dealing with their own things.
Sure, thank you. I hope that everybody has heard me so far, but, and kind of just speak more perhaps about what the vibe is there and like what you should be doing, should you be using this as a chance to talk more about your work? Should you be listening? Should you just hold back when faculty members are getting at it, that kind of thing. And I guess my second question would be about visiting professorships and whether or to what extent you see those as potentials for tenure track, falling into tenure track jobs, whether yes or no. I say that not because I'm looking for a visiting professorship, but because I think I know I'm in the pool with a visiting professor. So I'm wondering how much that can kind of ensure someone to go forward, or if you should be considering those just as much as tenure track jobs and your own applying to see it as something that can go forward. And so, yeah, those are my questions.
Can I answer the dinner one? I guess the visiting prof I've never been one, so so I think I would say you kind of have to be true to yourself, but not too relaxed, I guess. Because for myself, for example, I was very tired because after a long day, when you have to eat dinner with them, you're just really, really exhausted. So I think for me, I chose to listen more because I just didn't want to make any mistakes. And I think it's a strategy. You don't have to risk yourself by, But yeah, I think, for example, I've been to only 2 or so, but one thing that was common was because maybe they were drinking, they talked the negative things about the department, especially the things that they're going through. And how they were complaining about some of the new faculty members as well. For example, I come from I was interning for a mechanical engineering position, and usually mechanical engineering has different like themes like thermal fluids, controls, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, yeah, all the new faculties want to teach thermal fluids, but like nobody wants to teach these other courses. Like everyone's so lazy. They just don't want to develop new courses. Like, and then it gets kind of awkward, right? You're like when you say something, it might come out in the wrong way. So in these kind of instances, I just kind of laugh and I kind of just don't share my own views on that. I mean, first of all, you wouldn't know, right? I mean, you're just hearing from them, right? So I think it's best to listen and just not try to not make too many mistakes. But at the same time, you don't want to be viewed as someone that's not fun. So, you know, I think I tried to bring up something casual that could kind of deviate the conversations from these like talks about the departments. So I think that, and we had good talks like about, like for example, what the city, the living costs, and you know what fun things there are to do. And I think, so yeah, just kind of leading the conversation towards that, I think is good. But sometimes they can ask you like tough questions too, but you know, so you have to be alert too. So it's balanced and it's hard, but yeah, I did enjoy both of those dinners. It was tough. It was tough. Yeah.
I haven't had that many dinners, but what I can say with both in my undergrad and my master's, I was a part of the student people who had meals with the incoming job candidates. And so I was on the other side, and there was one candidate that we ranked last because they were complaining about how ugly the halls at the University of Ottawa were. This is at the University of Windsor. They're complaining about the aesthetics of the University of Ottawa. Now, I don't know if you've been to the University of Windsor, but it's not known as the architectural capital, you know, of universities in Canada. So, you know, immediately we were like, okay, that's your standard. That was your big problem there. Like, oh, you know, so my short version is don't underestimate the student interaction, right? I think that the meal with the colleagues is long and always at the end of the day. Sometimes they do a lunch and then you definitely don't take the wine, but you know, the lunch is better than the dinner, but you're gonna be tired no matter when you do it. And sometimes the candidates think that they have an easier job with the students, and I think that that's misguided. You know, with students, you're not as worried about your academic prowess, but you want to make sure that you're friendly in that regard. In terms of the visiting professorship thing, so this is a toss-up, right? Like I said, sometimes you don't know why you don't get hired. Sometimes people are putting on a job call because they actually know they want the internal candidate, but they have to follow formal procedures, right? So sometimes that's the case. Other times that's not at all. They're looking for somebody with a totally different area, right? If you're gonna apply for a visiting professorship, I think it's very valuable for one reason that we've heard already, networking. It's just another really good way to get to know people in a longer term, and it points to all kinds of different avenues. It gives you more experience. So if, you know, you framed it because you said you might be in competition and you're wondering if you are at a disadvantage. Maybe, maybe not, right? It's really, really hard to tell, to be honest. It's very specific to each department and faculty. But if you have the opportunity to do one, I think you apply for all kinds of reasons. It may give you an edge, you never know, right? Like I moved from limited term, basically visiting, into the tenure track. It took some time, right? But you know, it can work out, but I just don't think that it would be responsible to provide any kind of statistics. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Michael. I think the only other thing about the dinners and the lunches and that is, I think one of the good strategies is ahead of time thinking about how much you want to disclose about yourself personally. Because those kinds of questions might come up over those dinners, like, do you have a partner? What does your partner think of Toronto? Or wherever it is, like, what do they think? And so if you think ahead of time about how comfortable you are disclosing how much, then you can feel more prepared when those things kind of come up, or divert to like, hey, what's fun to do here? And like, this street looks great, or, you know, so I think that's an important thing to think about ahead too, is sometimes that's when the more personal sort of questions come out, and you may have a different level of comfort for how much you want to share. So great questions, Melody. Other questions? Yes, please. Seth.
I'm pretty loud, I think I can do it.
Oh, you're great. Yeah.
Loud American. So, Bobby Kemp. My name is Bobby Kemp. I'm doing my master's in media production at the Creative School. And I was just wondering if you, both of you could either speak on like that aha moment where you were like, I definitely want to be a professor as opposed to joining like a private sector job. and if like TA-ship and TA jobs had anything to do with that.
Wait for that moment. I think, to be honest, right, I said it before, keep your eye on the private sector as well. I don't think of it as a religion, like a calling like that, you know what I mean? Like sometimes people are like, that's what I'm meant to be. And I think, both you and Sarah had said, yeah, we really, for sure, we wanted to do that, but that's a little bit different about me. I was kicked out of high school twice. It took a year off of university. Like I've had a very different kind of a path. I've had a bit of a different path to getting here. So I haven't had that aha moment, right? I still want to change the world. That's my calling. And I think, helping my students become those people who do it is fantastic. It's one of the benefits of working in a business school that's not common in a philosophical department, is that you're watching students go out and make decisions that are impacting huge numbers of people, the roles that they're taking on. And so that's where I feel my calling is, and I'm trying to pursue that how it goes. This happened to be the way that opened up for me. That being said, I was a TA for my second year undergrad, right? I started TAing right away, and I found it hugely valuable. I usually worked in courses that were doing philosophy for non-philosophy majors, so like technology, human values and the environment, philosophy of education, right? Communication, argumentation, things like that. And it showed me the value of interdisciplinary education and just learn about everything you possibly can. And that's always been in my bones as a curious guy. So I think TA-ships are good to give you a view on the breadth of knowledge from other people, especially other students around that age, and that can really inspire you to an academic career and pursuit. But I wouldn't say there was an aha moment in that way. I think there was a moment where I said, yes, I can do this, right? Like, yeah, I think that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, to put it short for me, because I kind of grew up into like wanting to become a professor because my father was a professor, but one thing that made me really doubt myself was during the undergrad. Undergrad was just so tough for me. But then I think one thing that really, brought me back was like my aha moment, I guess, was like doing undergrad research. Just working in the lab with the graduate students, seeing what they do every day, and just doing lab work myself, being in that discipline of doing lab work, really just got me really interested in research, and definitely like and after starting my graduate school, so teaching assistantships definitely helped, and definitely like I TA'd a very, very small class once and a very, very big class, and I really enjoyed TAing the small class because I really got to see them face to face and sort of learn their names and go through what they're going through, like learning what they're going through, and sometimes like them coming up to me after talking about like how their GP is bad and they're struggling, and trying to help them out in career, not just inside the course. I think really all of those moments are really like helped me build up my passion for becoming an academic.
Thanks, Jen. I think we have time for one more question. Ketan at the back.
Thank you so much for this panel. It's been really helpful. So my name is Ketan. I'm one of the Korean professional development staff here. So I'm one of the people that helps, as you mentioned, CV, resume support, that kind of thing. This is coming from personal experience. So you mentioned recommendation letters from supervisors, reference letters. I've had to write my own that my professors then modified during my PhD and postdoc. So I'm wondering if you could comment on how much of that plays a role with the hiring committee, and how do you differentiate it enough from your cover letter if you're with a mentor that maybe doesn't want to do the legwork and makes you write it yourself? Thank you.
I've had to write my own recommendations numerous times, and they're often it's a very grueling process. I mean, like you're trying to just praise yourself and hoping that the professor will agree with you. It's just kind of a tough process. But I think it's actually, I would take it as an opportunity. Like because maybe the professor will not care so much that maybe they won't even write anything good about you, for example, right? So, if you can write your own, you can really take the time to emphasize based on thinking from that professor's perspective, like the time we spent together kind of thing, like so revolving your recommendation around experiences you had together, I think is always the best because it's something more tangible, right? So, and writing something that you want to emphasize that will kind of put you up compared to other applications, I think is really good. So yeah, I would definitely take it as an opportunity, and don't be too disappointed when someone just comes back to you and be like, write your own. So because they will do that. So I mean, because it's hard for them also to remember everything. And yeah, and I didn't really think about differentiating that from my application package. I don't think they expect you because they're coming from two different people, right? So even if they're overlapped, it could be a good thing. I think it could highlight some of the things that that you emphasize that the recommender emphasizes. That could be a double plus, right? So I wouldn't try to force myself to write something that I didn't write in the application package. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, my first advice is if you find yourself in a position where somebody asks you for a reference letter, just write it. Don't ask them to do that. I'm going to make that call. Let's try to shift that norm if we can. I think you should write letters for people, not have them write them themselves. But I also was in a position where I had to write my own letter, and it was actually horrible in hindsight. I learned it was horrible because when I saw a letter that somebody else had written for me, because there was one application process or something or other where the letters weren't anonymous, I had to submit it, and I was like, holy shit, that's really good, right? And I was like, that, but I wrote a letter from a person even higher up the chain for myself that was a quarter of the quality of this other letter that I had read. So one piece of advice, try to read a letter somebody else has written as a guideline if you can. That's, I think, a very helpful thing. And I fully agree that overlap is a good thing. I mean, you want synergy. If they read a recommendation letter, they're like, is this the same candidate? Right, that's not good, right? You should be able to have some overlap, but then try to think about the unique things about your relationship, right? So like one of the things, like in my cover letter, I'll talk about my ideas, whereas, one of the things that I put into the letter was, I really appreciate Michael's creativity, right? But in my letter, I didn't say, I'm a very creative guy. Like I just tried to show it through my research and things like that. So, but I knew that my supervisor, one of the things he likes, he was like, you always have another idea, man, right? And so it's like, okay, so I put that in, right? Something a little bit more personal and a little less, tailored. So because you are a part of that relationship, even with the person asking, try to focus a little bit on that relationship and then add that in and add to spice it. So overlap is good, right? But again, think about it from the supervisor's perspective, right? I think this is the kind of work that I would expect from a colleague, right? And this is, I didn't say this during the regular Q&A, but you have to switch your mindset from applicant to colleague, right? And it's a strange feeling because you're like, I don't have a job and I'm broke, right? But you have to pretend, and we heard from Sarah, once she had a job, look at the change, right? You have to not have the job and act as though you have it already. Because they want a colleague, they don't want a trainee. That's what your PhD's for, that's what your postdoc's for. When you get there, you're a colleague, right? And so, right, getting a reference letter in the voice of, this is a person that I respect as a colleague, not as, this was a great student of mine, right? And so changing that voice and changing that relationship so that it leads through the letter, I think is a good thing to do.
Great, wow. Well, you both, and of course, including Sarah, have shared so much, given us such great advice, and opened up it was more than we could expect. I want to thank Shirley Lee, who I see from YSJS, who's monitoring the live feed very carefully for us, so thank you. I want to thank you so much for this, and I want to thank all of you for taking time to be here. We know you always have lots of other things, other duties, other competing interests, in the fact that you've spent time with us tonight. And been paying such careful attention to these really great panelists is wonderful. So thank you very much. Please stay and enjoy the food and drink and network, and we hope to see you at our next events that Seth introduced and all our other events, which you'll find in Grad News and on our social media. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Thank you.